When I first played Bewildered on stream, I didn't exactly have the best time. Take my flesh! Burn and just let me take it! And not only do I have to get the bear, bring it here, I've gotta bring that red thing back! This clip, highlighting me rage quitting from the final chase scene in Chapter 1 of Bewildered, is what I was constantly thinking of as I went back to this game for the second time to gather footage for this video. When I started gathering footage, to be perfectly honest, I thought I was going to hate this game. And don't get me wrong, this game has a lot of flaws, especially in Chapter 1. However, in my original playthrough of this game, I neglected the other half of it, Chapter 2. This is where Bewildered becomes a truly fascinating case study, as Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 of this game are polar opposite experiences. Chapter 1 is unfair, grindy, and repetitive, while Chapter 2 is unique, scary, and narratively interesting. Bewildered is one of the only games I can think of on Roblox right now that has two polar opposite chapters, one terrible and one fantastic. So this leaves me at quite a loss as to how to review it. So join me on today's episode of Rister's Roblox Reviews, where we look at the fascinating horror genre on Roblox. Today, we will be looking at Bewildered and how it redeemed itself. Once again, hi! This is just another reminder to you all that if you want to see me play these games live on stream, come follow me at twitch.tv/Rister'sRobloxReviews to watch me and play along with me in my game, so you can appear in the backgrounds of these videos. I record footage for this series on Wednesdays and upload these videos on Sundays. With that out of the way, I hope you all enjoy. I can't even begin to describe how weird this game is for me. To be perfectly honest with you, if this game didn't have a Chapter 2 and only contained Chapter 1, I probably would have rated it a 2 out of 10. And we'll get to why later. Chapter 2, by contrast, is an amazing experience of horror based on the format that the Mimic created and made the standard for horror on Roblox. Just as a disclaimer, yes, this game is not completely finished yet, with only one part of Chapter 2 being out right now. I am planning on making short updates for these videos once the next chapters come out, which will probably be a few minutes long and will just be my brief thoughts. For this video though, I plan to look at the experience as a whole, not ranking it chapter by chapter. This means that, yes, even though Chapter 1 and 2 are very different, I must take them both into consideration in my rankings and criteria. My criteria, as always, consist of aesthetic, story, gameplay, and overall. If you'd like to see more details about these categories, go watch my previous video on Doors where I describe it in more detail. But I'd like to spend this, and future episodes, more based on the game and less on my criteria. So with that done, let's hop right into the first category. Aesthetic. This game's aesthetic, just like the game as a whole, is vastly different from Chapter 1 to Chapter 2. And just like the game as a whole, Chapter 1's aesthetic is lacking, while Chapter 2's is unique and effective. Chapter 1 is filled with standard horror locales, a dark forest, a cave, a general building, and a house. Nothing stands out here, but I will give Chapter 1 props for having a few things. Number 1, I actually quite like a lot of the game's visual effects, especially during the second chase scene, where we see the hallways stretch out before our very eyes and expand to the maze that we navigate during this scene. Also, while the locales are all very basic, all of them, except for the cave, which is very boring, are very well decorated and have sprinkles of originality throughout them. In the building, I like how the lights on the side go out as you pass them. It's a very cool touch. And the room where you get the security key has floating furniture, a very cool aesthetic that's weirdly confined to this one room. The house, while a boring locale on its own, has a lot of very cool and uniquely scary paintings scattered throughout its walls, which I quite enjoy, and, if you're a smart boy, you can use as landmarks to tell where in the house you're located at. However, as I've stated a million times now, this game really finds itself in Chapter 2. There are so many cool aesthetic decisions in Chapter 2, even from the beginning where we see a cool intro cutscene of a place we visit later in the chapter, and see the door we just exited being attached to nothing but thin air. The mental asylum that the majority of the chapter takes place in is a great locale. Even when we first arrive, we're immediately attacked by a nurse attack that genuinely made me tense when I played it the first time. Oh! Run, Hellaman! Hellaman, run! We're gonna die! Hellaman! Ah! There is no way to avoid getting killed here, which is actually something I really like. And we wake up in a very cool cutscene with perhaps one of my favorite transitions in all of Roblox horror. Oh, that was actually kind of sick. That was actually a kind of sick transition. Like, that was awesome. The hospital is filled with creepy puppets or sculptures, and even the front garden has an amazingly creepy statue and mysterious figure watching us from the window. The puppets create an amazing atmosphere, all of them situated horrifically. I am also a big fan of the fact that the further you progress, the deeper you go into the asylum. The door is getting more secured and obviously meant for more unstable individuals. And even the monsters we avoid in these segments are effectively creepy and really fit the atmosphere well. That, in contrast with Chapter 1, has odd choices for monsters. I mean, the crying lady at the end kind of makes sense. I mean, we can reasonably assume that this is her house, but we don't know anything about her at all. Also, is the first monster a scarecrow? What is he doing in a cave? Also, I know that this is the guy who is all over the thumbnail, fan art, and the lobby, but seriously, what is up with this guy? He's effectively scary, I guess, but like, what? Does he own this hotel or whatever this place is? Who is he? Why is he here? Why he look like that? I know that there's some lore stuff in Chapter 2 about the monsters, but I want to cover that more in the story section of the review. In addition, we only learn about this stuff in Chapter 2, but I played through Chapter 1 without that information, and these monsters were fairly confusing to me. To be honest, not many Roblox horror games have monsters that really make sense. But Chapter 2's monsters do make a lot of sense to be here, and I think Chapter 1 really fell short of that same continuity. Overall, the aesthetic of Chapter 1 isn't terrible, but it isn't very unique, and even though a mental asylum is not a very original location, Chapter 2 makes the setting its own through its horrific decor. It's very Outlast-esque, come to think of it. Big fan of it. Story. As I mentioned before, the story is a little odd in this game. It's definitely there, and there's some segments of interesting plot lines, but once again, the story is mostly in Chapter 2 and is lacking in Chapter 1. Are you guys sensing a theme here yet? Do you guys kinda understand that Chapter 2 is a far superior experience to Chapter 1 yet? If not, don't worry, just wait until we get to gameplay. Oh boy. Chapter 1 opens with an intro cutscene that, to be fair to Chapter 1, is good at building tension and intrigue early on in the game. I like how you can interact and get your character's thoughts on basically everything in the environment. It makes this intro feel much longer and more detailed, even though you can realistically complete it in less than a minute. I like the small details like the gramophone and the chair falling over, even though that's more of an aesthetic choice. All of this tension building, though, falls apart immediately once this happens. Hey mom, can you like get off of my face, please? Yeah, I didn't even jump. I almost laughed at this jump scare, to be perfectly honest. And it's not like it's even a terrible jump scare. They repeat it later in the game and it actually made me jump. It's just that the use of it is terrible and not even a little bit scary. And what, is this our mom? Is our mom jump scaring us and gluing herself to our face like some sort of fake mustache? It's clear this is supposed to be setting up as foreshadowing. And to be fair, this comes back in Chapter 2 in a pretty fun way, but we'll get to it. After that intro in Chapter 1, we then shoot to 3 years later where we're in a forest. For no reason. I mean, seriously, why are we out here? The only way this makes any sense is if the story is in an afterlife limbo, which actually might be a satisfying twist if we start to take in the stuff from Chapter 2, but alright, enough about Chapter 2, back to Chapter 1. But we're basically done with story from Chapter 1. No, I'm serious. That's literally all of the story in Chapter 1. We don't get a single line of story from the first moment of playable action in the game all the way to the end of Chapter 1. I could go on a rant about why this is bad, but again, it's Chapter 1 of Bewildered. Are we surprised at this point that it's lacking? Instead, I'll talk about how Chapter 2 improves upon Chapter 1's story. Chapter 2 includes notes scattered about the map, which, yes, I did read all of them in preparation for this video. There are great details about a local in the area investigating the strange monsters and occurrences in the area. He says that the monsters can take the form of someone you know and can try to manipulate you, which actually makes me kinda excited to see maybe some of that in the next chapter. Unfortunately, these notes end with the apparent death of the writer, which, if we are meant to be in a death limbo, perhaps could still be us. The other tidbit of story in this chapter comes from news articles detailing a missing family. From the pictures of the house matching the house in the beginning of Chapter 1, it's meant to be understood that the missing family is supposed to be the family of our main character, even though he doesn't seem to remember it. Also, I couldn't find any good spot to insert this, but the main character now has voice acting.
Whoever wrote this probably had an idea of this place. Perhaps I should find more of these and find out more about where I am.
It's always cool to hear a voice in a Roblox game, but the acting is not the best I've ever heard. Probably because it was just done by the dev or one of their friends. And if any Roblox game out there wants to hire me as a voice actor, my business email is Rister'sRobloxReviews@gmail.com, and my DMs are open, so hit me up. Anyways, with the side notes over, this is the extent of the story we get in Chapter 2. It's not much, but more than Chapter 1, and Chapter 2's story is actually pretty intriguing. The other form of story that I wanted to mention, though, is the story that we, the player, can gather from the environment. Chapter 2's mental asylum is full of this. The creepy statues that litter the place give off a horrific sense of unease and terror, and are all posed in a unique way. I kept expecting one of these things to come alive and kill me, and I would be very happy if we get that in a later chapter. Also, the last note from the anonymous note writer is right next to a bloody surgeon room that houses one of these statues, making the player reasonably assume that the statues were actually made from people, or at least were people at some point. These creepy statues are perhaps the greatest atmospheric and environmental strength of Bewildered, and I think they're excellent. Gameplay. For this entire review, I've been talking about Chapter 1 first and Chapter 2 second, but I'm actually going to reverse the order for gameplay, because I have some choice words for Chapter 1's gameplay. The gameplay of Chapter 2 is very standard. No, really, it's just walking around with a flashlight and sometimes interacting with stuff. Good, but not really that special. However, I will give special props to the door puzzle at the end of the chapter. It's a really cool, albeit common, way of doing a puzzle where numbers correspond to shapes that are in a room. Count the number of those shapes, you get the code. I liked this puzzle because all the shapes are in a single room, not scattered around the map annoyingly, and it's in the style of a children's toy room, which has some great environmental implications, since this is, presumably, the maximum security area of the asylum. My one complaint about Chapter 2's gameplay is that it felt like the monsters are a little bit too chill in Chapter 2. I never really felt like I was in danger of getting caught, especially in the last chase, where I only saw the monster one single time. However, this is a much better alternative than the monster's behavior in Chapter 1. I just wish I felt a bit more scared, but it's overall not terrible. And now we get to Chapter 1. First things first, let me get the broad strokes out of the way. The first and last chase sequences of the game are perhaps the worst chase maze sequences in any Roblox horror game I've ever played. The second chase, the one with the disfigured bacon hair guy, is fine. I don't have any problems with that chase. Want to know why? Because there are actually places to hide in that chase maze. You heard me right. In the first and last chase maze sequences of Chapter 1, there are no hiding spots whatsoever. Not only that, these sequences' monsters seem to have a homing device on you, and they always know where you are, and they run faster than you, so you will run out of sprint stamina and die. The first chase sequence is bad, but it's nowhere near as terrible as the last chase sequence because at least the first one takes place in a massive cave system, so you can get a lot of space between you and the monster. Not only this, the first chase is short with a simple goal: find the exit. You never have to backtrack at all, you just have to get lucky with not running into the monster. This is very, very hard on solo, but it's very doable if you have a few friends. However, due to some weird glitch or system or something weird, the game doesn't let me take any of the people I was playing with into the subsequent chase mazes of the game, except for Helloman, presumably because the game thought he was just that cool. This made the final chase of the game much harder on top of how difficult it is already. Let me set this up for you. The final chase scene takes place in a small house with no hiding spots except for a single spawn area. And a monster who is faster than your walking speed will never stop chasing you when she sees you and somehow always finds where you are on the map. You have to find 3 relics, pick them up, and bring them back to the starting area. If you die with a relic in your hand, you lose it from your inventory and need to get it again. And one of these relics are stuck behind a puzzle that require you to get a teddy bear, light it on fire, and burn the branches blocking the relic. I am not kidding when I tell you I genuinely think that this final chase maze is impossible playing by yourself, which is how I originally played this game when I first tried it. This is what caused me to rage quit in that now infamous clip. Here, play it again, but this time with the context of everything I just told you. Take my flesh! Burn and just let me take it! And not only do I have to get the bear, bring it here, I've got to bring that red thing back! That clip came at the end of a 30-minute session of trying to complete this one section. Can you understand why I quit the game now? I genuinely think that this chase maze, as well as Chapter 1 in general, is bad game design. The fact that I needed multiple people to complete this chapter should be an obvious sign of just how crappy Chapter 1 is. I think this final chase maze is perhaps the worst chase maze I've ever played in any game ever, and I played Nico's Next Bots. I could rant about this for a long time, but instead I'll challenge you guys. Please try to complete this chase maze by yourself in under 15 minutes. If you can, I will buy you a gifted sub in my Twitch channel, but you need to send me the full uninterrupted video of you completing it. This is my official challenge to you all, and the first one to send me a video of it completed will get the sub. Try it, and you'll understand why I rage quit this game my first time playing. Overall, Bewildered is a polar opposite game. Chapter 1 is one of the most unfairly, poorly designed horror games I've ever played, but Chapter 2 is a unique, suspenseful, effective horror game. It genuinely shocks me that these two chapters were made by the same people, and honestly, I have to give massive props to the team that designed it in massively improving their mistakes and finding their own style. If I'm being perfectly honest, I recommend you play Bewildered because it is an excellent case study for game developers to look at. Play Chapter 1, then play Chapter 2. Playing both of them back to back should make any aspiring horror game dev understand what can make games like these succeed or fail. On the other hand, if you're just looking to be scared and have fun, I recommend you play this game, but I actually think you should skip Chapter 1. Trust me, you're not missing out on any important story or any exciting or revolutionary gameplay sequences. Like, yeah, the second chase isn't bad, but it's just standard with nothing exciting about it that you can't just hear about and understand. In fact, you can probably get a full understanding of the entirety of Chapter 1 just by watching the footage that has been in the back of this video the whole time. But what would I rate this game out of 10? As you know, I rank games on a scale of 1 to 10, with a 1 being to stay as far away as possible, a 5 being neutral, and a 10 being perfect. I am really fond of Chapter 2 in this game, but I'm here to review Bewildered as it is as a whole. And even though I recommend everyone skip Chapter 1 in their own playthroughs, I can't ignore it in my review. With this in mind, I rank Bewildered a 5 out of 10. Half of this game I love, and the other half I hate. So to me, it makes sense to pick a ranking that's straight down the middle. I've been Rister'sRobloxReviews, and thank you for watching my review of Bewildered.